just because I'm still working on playing the notes of tune and, you know,
Yes.
that kind of thing. But I love the instrument. It's a lot of fun to play. It's nice to be in the bottom of the band, you know.
Excellent.
In the tone that you play the bass trombone. Did it result any changes in the tone quality?
Of my tenor trombone?
Yeah.
Yes.
When
Yes,
you after bass trombone you play the little horn.
Yeah, because when you play bass trombone, again, we're talking about a bass trombone, which is it's the same length as this trombone. I think they're 9 feet or something like that. But it's the bore size, which is the hole that you blow through, is considerably bigger. And the horn has these valves that add length to the horn, so you're able to play much lower than a regular tenor trombone. Like a tenor trombone, really the usable range. And then there's the tenor trombone, there's some notes that aren't on the horn, and the next note you were able to play is there's some notes missing in between. So with a bass trombone and a trigger, they call it, or a ventil, you have these notes. I'm playing them in false tones on this horn, but you'll hear what I mean. Those notes are on the bass trombone as a real note, but I'm playing a fake note on the trombone. So that's
Yes.
one of the advantages. Anyway, what happens when you're playing the bigger notes or the lower notes on the bass trombone with a bigger mouthpiece, when you go back to the smaller horn with the smaller mouthpiece, it feels very strange. I feel like my sound is brighter because my lips are more puffier, you know what I mean? You know? So it takes a minute to get used to going back and forth. And the show that I do, it's a lot of very quick, you know, play 5 bars on tenor, grab the bass trombone, play for 32 bars, put the bass trombone down, play, you know, another minute or 2 on tenor. So you get used to it after a while. But the tenor I play on the show is a much bigger horn. It's a Con 8H, which has a 5G mouthpiece. The 5G mouthpiece is a much wider rim.
Yeah.
I tried playing a smaller horn on the show, but it was too much of a change from bass trombone to this. And this was extremely bright, and it just didn't fit in with the quasi-classical environment. It didn't blend. So I had to adjust my equipment. You know. I mean, you have to do that on different jobs, depending on what you're playing. One day you may be playing a jazz job, and this is my preferred jazz horn. The next day you may be playing salsa or Latin music, and maybe you want to play really loud, and you want to play a little bit bigger horn. So I have another horn that's slightly bigger than this one. Use a little different mouthpiece, and you have to change your sound to adapt to the style of music that you're playing. You know, if you were playing in an orchestra, you wouldn't play something like this. You would play a much bigger horn, maybe like the one I described with the extra tubing on it and stuff like that, to play a bigger, warmer sound to blend with the sonority of the strings and all that type of thing, you know. So anyway, for the doubling, it takes a little. It took me some getting used to. It took a few weeks of experimenting with mouthpieces and going crazy, you know. Any other questions?
You mentioned practices, like professional, like as you. How many hours do you practice daily?
This week, none. But when I was younger, it was a passion every day. You know, you wake up and you have a cup of coffee and you grab your trombone and start playing for 5 or 6 hours sometimes every day. And it's easy for that time to go by when you're playing jazz tunes or playing scales, or another thing us brass players do. We call them long tones. And they're exactly what the word implies. You just play tones as long as you can, over and over and over again, just so you get your embouchure or your lips used to playing a certain note, a certain register. So I would turn on a baseball game or a football game and would turn the sound off and just go. And do that for about 12 times, you know. And so after you do that for 2 hours, you put the horn down, make a sandwich, have a drink, come back, and do it again. You know, so and then you would go on to, for instance, just in a practice routine, you would work on long tones for sound, for quality of sound and your attack. Then you would maybe work on what we call flexibilities, which is moving between the notes on your horn with just your lips, like. And then stop and then do something different. Until your head explodes, you know. but you know, that was that's how how the time can add up. You know, you just get kind of caught up in it. Now, because I'm busy working so much, I don't find as much time to practice. But still, like we were talking about this Broadway show I'm playing where I have to play this big bass trombone and the tenor trombone, I found myself going right back into that practice mode that I had when I was younger, because I knew I needed to learn a certain thing and I only had a short time to learn it in, so I really needed to get serious about every day getting up, playing long tones on the bass trombone, and the bass trombone long tones sound like this. Over and over again. It's like just like the tenor. So it depends on what I'm doing in the moment, in the month, in the week, what jobs I'm playing, what I need to practice for. You know, I think the older you get, the more responsibilities you have with, you know, your apartment and life and other things outside of music. You don't have as much free time as you did when you were a college kid, you know. So it's kind of practice by necessity now, but in younger years, lots of time, lots of hours. And then, you know, when you're not at home practicing, you go out and you try to find music, live music somewhere, and you want to bring your horn and sit in. Like Wednesday night, we saw some friends at Yaderman Cafe. Yaderman, something like that. I was going to say Jaderman, but that's not right. But, anyway, it was with the Hungarian swing company that these guys were playing, and we had a great time. They had some material they were rehearsing for the job we played last night, and then a few of us came and sat in and played. So not only do you practice during the day, but then at night, after you've been practicing, you say, okay, I need a chance to go out and try all these things that I've been learning. So you need a venue to go experiment, you know, play with a live rhythm section, which is really nice, you know. They make practice CDs for guys like myself that just want to play over and over again with music, with a rhythm section. But the recordings are just piano, bass, and drums, and different songs, and it comes with a book with the melodies written out. They're Jamie Ebersol's, you're familiar with that. And you can just play those things for hours, and since the rhythm section is on a CD, they never complain, they never get hungry, they never have to stop for a break. You know? I mean, no offense. But playing with a CD like that, with a rhythm section, you're playing with three guys that they can't hear you. You can hear them, but there's no interaction. So the best thing in the world to do is to get out and find a scene where there's live music and you can play with rhythm section players live. Because it's not only am I playing the melody up here or playing jazz, we're all listening to each other. Like I'll listen to rhythmically, you know, you throw a little like a 3/4 pattern in, and I'll pick up on that, and that'll change the way I think of my next idea. I'll think, oh, that was kind of cool, I'll play that. Or the bass might play a different slide into a note or something, or play a different bass note in the chord progression that changes the whole tonality of what I'm thinking the chord is. So it'll change everything I hear. Then the piano player can play an extension of the regular chord change, and that will throw me into another frame of mind, you know. So it's not all one-sided where I'm just playing, and these guys are back behind me just banging away. It's a team effort, you know. So we're all kind of creating the moment as it happens, you know, one note at a time, you know. So to answer your question, yes, lots of practicing and lots of stuff like that, and going out and enjoying playing with live music and stuff like that. It's all part of training yourself, you know, to do it better every time, you know. Good question, very good question. Anybody else?
Another one.
Yeah.
Someone has show your last night show why I don't know that kind of say. And wake up in the morning and come out with the idea to play an instrument. How many you should have to start?
Okay, I'm not sure if I understood that correctly.
Okay. Should I ask you again?
Yeah.
Okay. If somebody in my age
Yeah.
didn't play music,
Oh, okay.
no never, and came up with the idea. Morning.
Oh, you wake up and go, I want to play the trumpet. Oh, okay. Well, I think what you have to do is buy the instrument first of all, and a mouthpiece, and with a book, you know, it starts from the beginning. You have to learn your scales. That's even more advanced than you would start with. You would start with the long tones we talked about, you know, and start getting a sound, and then make it through that book, get the next one, and just keep progressing. Now, as far as being a jazz trombone player, I think what you have to do, there's different schools of playing jazz. I don't come from the school where I think of chord progressions and scales and patterns in my head when I'm playing. I kind of play in the moment. I think of melodic lines that fit over the chord changes and feed off of the input of the chord changes by the rhythm section. So basically what I'm getting at is I have, throughout the years, by listening to a lot of music, kind of programmed my little computer up here, or whatever you want to call it, the memory banks, to be able to create melodic lines and jazz lines, okay? So if you want to learn that way, you would have to go out and find as many recordings of the kind of jazz that really turns you on, that you really like, and say, okay, I want to play like that. So you listen to it. You wake up every morning, you put that record on, and you listen to it over and over again until you hear it. You can then start finding yourself singing along with it. Like, oh, I know this solo. And then okay, so you have it here. You know it. Now, the hard thing is to transfer it to here. So, by moments and hours and days and weeks in your house, sitting there by yourself, figuring your stuff out, playing along with those recordings, you slowly program yourself to play these lines on your horn. But it's a long road. It's for someone that doesn't have a lot of experience with music. If you played another instrument before, it may be a little easier because you have a general knowledge of music. But if you're starting from scratch, it's you kind of have to just see what comes out, because you probably have favorite songs from when you were in high school, and when you were younger, and you probably know those songs because you listen to them so much. You just have to get into the jazz idiom that way, and just buy recordings. Go on iTunes and download a bunch of stuff and listen. And that's the way I learned how to play it. There's a lot of different ways in schools of jazz players that will learn not just the chord progressions, but different modes and different scales, you know, that fit over a progression of chords. And there's a whole mathematical brain that can wrap around that. I'm not that kind of person. I come from a different side, and I just do it from what comes off the top of my head. You know, I'm faking it, basically, is what I'm trying to say. No. Anyway, so you have to immerse yourself in what you want to do and just see what comes out. And you might surprise yourself. You know, if you start playing and something will pop out, and you go, wow, did I really play that? You know. One thing I did when I was younger is I used to record myself playing with those recordings, those little rhythm section records. And I would go back and listen to myself later. And, you know, sometimes it was depressing. Sometimes it was like, wow, that was interesting. I don't know where that came from. But then you listen, okay, and then you try to remember what you did. Then you can analyze, okay, I was playing that pattern over a B flat 7, E flat 7, you know, then you can analyze it that way. But recording yourself playing when you're experimenting with jazz is very important, because you can kind of be your own worst critic. You can say, I don't want to play that again, and you won't play it again. But if you find something that you like that comes out, then you can keep that. You can file that away in your good licks, you know. And so really it's possible. It's possible for anybody to start from scratch, but it takes a lot of dedication. Yeah. What would you play if you wanted to? Trombone?
Yeah.
All right, here you go. You know, you'd be surprised how easy this is. Really. No. Any other questions about the
Who were your
jazz?
first jazz heroes? Who were your first jazz heroes that you used to develop?
My first jazz heroes?
Yeah.
My father. Yeah, well, like I was saying earlier, I think you came in a little later, but my father's a professional trombone player, and since I can remember, I said 5 years old, but since I was just a little kid, all I remember is him playing in the house, and there was always music playing. Not only live musicians in the house having jam sessions, but recordings. He had a huge record collection. I wasn't allowed to touch the records because I was a kid, you know. Oops, sorry, Dad. You know, but so it took a while for him to trust me to get into the records. Of course, when he was at work, I'd get into the records, but that's a whole other story. But he had a great record collection, and he had all these famous old trombone players, you know, Irby Green, Tommy Dorsey, and going way back, you know, to Kid Ory and Trummy Young and stuff like that. A lot of Louis Armstrong recordings, and just having those around was a huge influence. But my dad was a huge influence as far as trombone is concerned, and I think the names I mentioned, Tommy Dorsey, were more traditional style players. Then when I moved out to Los Angeles, and I know Bela can concur on this one, there's a man who's passed away a while ago, but the trombone player that changed my life as a jazz trombone player was this guy. His name was Carl Fontana, and Bela was lucky enough to spend some time with him in Las Vegas, and to watch what he does in his daily life, you know, from going to the store or fixing the car or doing laundry and, you know, all those regular things. And then, you know, got to play with him and go out and go to sessions and stuff like that. So this guy was just, it's something sparked inside me. And all of a sudden, here I am waking up every morning, like we were just talking about, and putting on this one recording that he played called Emily. And I couldn't listen to that enough. It was just every chance I had, driving to work, I'd have it on the car, you know, and then I have it on my Walkman. Remember those? And it was one of those things where you hear something in music that just really turns you on. You're excited about it. You can't listen to it enough. And then when you're actually a musician yourself, you try to channel that excitement into your instrument. Say, God, I've got to learn how to do some of this, or at least one thing that this man can do. So you practice, and I started listening to those solos, and I would listen to the solo. I had listened to the solos so many times that I could whistle or sing along with them. So I knew it note for note, but I hadn't played it. But little by little, I'd play it. I'd learn the first couple of bars. I'd learn the first 4 bars. I'd learn the first 8 bars, and then I had the whole solo. Then after I learned the whole solo just by ear, then I would write it down. Then I would write down every note I played. Then I would write the chord progressions underneath it. And then it's kind of backwards. A lot of guys, chord progressions first. They'd listen to each bar, write it all down as they're going, and then try to play it. But I would do it the other way, where I would memorize it along with the solo until I could play it with the guy. So it was like just until you could play, so you could barely hear that there was 2 people playing. That kind of, and capturing vibrato, little nuances and articulation and breathing and sound and those things, So anyway, big influence, Carl Fontana. Sorry, I was going off on a tangent there. But another guy I actually listened to when I was, before Carl Fontana, was Bill Watrous. And Bill Watrous at the time, back in the 70s, was big guy in New York City. He was doing a lot of recording work. A guy he was kind of succeeded, who was another famous old trombone player, one of the best ever, was Irby Green. A great trombone player who played in all the big bands, did a lot of recording, a lot of movies. And let's see who else after that. There's another guy who was in Los Angeles who was very good friends with Carl Fontana. His name was Frank Rosolino. Familiar with that name? Do you know that? Frank Rosolino was from Detroit. He was Italian. Very fiery player, very articulate. He had a really very precise articulation when he played. And he also had this just passion. You could hear it. He's a very emotional player. When he played a ballad, you just wanted to cry. Just a very, very touching player. But he had a very tragic death and left us too early. But those were the guys that really kind of set me off on another direction. Because I had always been kind of traditional jazz up until that point. And then it was like, whoa, what is that? Well, this sliding stuff is for the birds. I want to learn to do that, all that stuff. So, you all these different people can influence you, and not just trombone players. There was back then I was listening to a lot of Clifford Brown, great trumpet player, and Ben Webster and Dexter Gordon, and sax players, and J.J. Johnson is another famous trombone player that was a big influence. So it's, I guess a point I'm trying to make is you can be influenced by your own instrument, but you can also be heavily influenced by other instruments. Like Louis Armstrong, I mentioned him earlier. He was a huge influence on a lot of musicians. Kind of put traditional jazz, or kept traditional jazz on the map for years. He wrote out his music and kept playing what we call traditional jazz back then throughout the 50s, 60s, and early 70s. While the Beatles were popular, while rock and roll came in, did all the different changes that it went through, he kept that music in society and he became an ambassador for the country. He was so well loved and his music was so received by everyone. So he was a huge influence, Louis Armstrong. And so you never know who, you might put a record on, you have no idea who it is, and you'll hear something that just goes, whoa, I like that. So then you've got another hero in your bin of music, musicians you want to emulate. Any other questions? How about we play a song? Good idea.